Welcome, stranger traveler. This is the place where shadows whisper secrets, and every rustling leaf hides a story. Here, in the tangled depths of the unknown, fate plays cruel games, and even the bravest souls tread lightly. Some seek answers, others revenge, but the forest demands a price for every step taken. Now, 5 stories await you, 5 journeys into the heart of darkness. Will you dare to listen? Let me begin. The Hollow Tree. Chapter 1. The Prodigal Son Returns. The Greyhound bus dropped Daniel Whitlock at a gas station that hadn't changed since his childhood. Same cracked pavement, same smell of diesel and wet pine. His father's funeral notice had arrived 3 days prior, a single line in Courier New. Come settle his affairs. No signature. The town of Black Hollow clung to the mountainside like lichen to a corpse. Boarded up storefronts, a rusted sign reading Population 387 with the 7 hanging upside down, and at the edge of the coal-black woods, the hollow tree. It was wrong. The massive sycamore had been dead for decades, its trunk split open like a wound. Local kids dared each other to touch it, whispering that something lived inside. Daniel's father had forbidden him from going near it. Some debts, he'd say, get passed down with the blood. Now, as rain began to fall, Daniel noticed fresh scratches around the hollow deep parallel grooves, as if something had tried to claw its way out. Chapter 2. The First Offering. The will was a single page. The house, the land, everything went to Daniel on one condition. Tend to the tree. First day of each month. You'll know how. That night, Daniel dreamed of roots. They slithered under his skin, burrowing toward his ribs. He woke choking, his mouth full of the taste of wet earth. On his nightstand, a single blackened coin, stamped with a symbol he didn't recognize. At dawn, a knock. Sheriff Holloway, a man who'd arrested Daniel for underage drinking 15 years ago, stood on the porch. Your daddy left something for you. He handed over a rusted lockbox. Inside, a ledger dating back to 1903, filled with names and dates. The last entry was his father's handwriting. Daniel, the 1st of October. Don't be late. The sheriff wouldn't meet his eyes. We all got our arrangements with the tree. Chapter 3. The Hunger Beneath. The 1st of October, midnight. Daniel stood before the hollow tree, lockbox at his feet. The wind carried a sound like teeth grinding against bark. He opened the box. The ledger's instructions were clear. Place the offering in the hollow. Do not look inside. The black coin burned his palm as he reached forward. Something grabbed his wrist. Bone-thin fingers, gray as old newspaper, curled around his arm. A voice like splitting wood hissed, "Late." The coin vanished into the darkness. The tree shuddered, sap oozing thick as blood. Then silence. Back in town, the diner's neon sign flickered out. Every clock stopped at 12:07. Chapter 4. What the Tree Remembers. The ledger's brittle pages revealed the truth. In 1903, Black Hollow's miners struck something far below the coal. A vein of metal so pure it sang when struck. They smelted it into coins, grew rich. Then the disappearances began. Men vanished near the tree. Their bodies returned days later, changed. Eyes blackened, mouths sewn shut with root fibers. The town made a bargain, monthly offerings, silence. But the tree never forgets a debt. Back in town, the diner's neon sign flickered out. Every clock stopped at 12:07. Chapter 5. The Last Whitlock. The 1st of November. Daniel is ready. He brings the ledger, a gasoline can, and his father's old hunting rifle. The tree's hollow drips with something that isn't sap. The sheriff and 6 others stand behind him, their coins in hand. It's the way, Holloway says. Daniel lights the match. The fire catches fast, too fast. The tree screams. The men scream louder as roots erupt from the ground, dragging them down. By dawn, the tree is ash. The town is empty. And in Daniel's pocket, a single, newly minted black coin. The Trail That Doesn't Forgive. Chapter 1. The Town at the Edge of the Forest. The town of Black Pines was a quiet place, nestled deep in the forests of the Pacific Northwest. It was the kind of town where everyone knew each other, where the streets were lined with old wooden houses, and where the air always carried the scent of pine and damp earth. The forest surrounded the town like a living wall, its trees towering and ancient, their branches whispering secrets to those who dared to listen. But there was one secret the forest kept closely guarded, a trail that led into its heart. The locals called it by many names: the Wishmaker's Path, the Trail of Shadows, or simply the Forbidden Trail. It was said that the trail appeared only to those who sought it, and that it led to a place where desires could be fulfilled. But the price for such a gift was steep, and those who returned were never the same. Old Henry was the town's most experienced woodsman. He had spent his entire life in the forest, hunting, tracking, and surviving where others would have been lost. But there was one thing: Henry never spoke of the trail. Even when the men gathered at the local tavern, swapping stories of strange lights and eerie sounds in the woods, Henry remained silent. His eyes would darken, and he would stare into the distance, as if remembering something he wished he could forget. One evening, as the townsfolk gathered around a crackling campfire, Henry broke his silence. His voice was low, almost a whisper, but it carried a weight that silenced everyone around him. "You've all heard of the trail," he began, "but none of you know what it truly is. I've been there, and I'll tell you what I saw." Chapter 2. The Forbidden Path. Henry paused, his eyes fixed on the flames. The fire crackled, casting long shadows that danced on the faces of the listeners. The wind, which had been still all evening, suddenly picked up, rustling the leaves as if warning them to stop. "Many years ago," Henry continued, "I was young and foolish. I thought the forest was my friend, that it would always protect me. But there are places where friendship ends. One day, I decided to take that trail. I'd heard the stories, but I didn't believe them. I thought they were just tales to scare children." He stopped again, his gaze distant, as if he were reliving that day. "I walked for hours. The forest grew denser, the air heavier. At some point, I realized I couldn't hear a thing. No wind, no animals, not even my own footsteps. Just silence. And then I saw it." "What?" Someone in the crowd couldn't help but ask. "The trail. It was narrow, barely visible, but I knew it was the one. I followed it, and with every step I felt something pressing down on me, as if the forest itself was trying to stop me. But I kept going, and then I saw it." Chapter 3. The Clearing. The clearing was unlike anything Henry had ever seen. The trees here were ancient, their trunks twisted and gnarled, their branches reaching upward like skeletal fingers. In the center of the clearing stood a tree so massive that its top disappeared into the sky. Its bark was covered in strange symbols that glowed faintly in the dim light. Henry approached the tree, his heart pounding in his chest. As he got closer, he heard a voice. It was soft but clear, as if it were speaking directly into his mind. "What do you desire?" the voice asked. Henry hesitated. He had come here seeking adventure, but now he felt a deep, primal fear. "Still," he answered. "I want wealth," he said. The voice replied, "Take a leaf from this tree, but remember all things come at a cost." Henry reached out and plucked a leaf. It was cold like ice, and seemed to pulse faintly in his hand. He put it in his pocket and turned to leave. But as he walked away, he felt a strange sensation, as if something had been taken from him. Chapter 4. The Price. When Henry returned to town, he immediately noticed that something was wrong. The people he passed on the street stared at him with wide eyes, and when he caught his reflection in a window, he understood why. He had aged. His hair was streaked with gray, his face lined with wrinkles. 10 years of his life had been taken from him. Desperate, Henry returned to the clearing the next day. He shouted at the tree, demanding answers. But the voice only said, "You got what you wanted, but you never asked what it would cost." Henry threw the leaf to the ground and left. He never set foot on the trail again. But sometimes, at night, he would hear the forest calling him back. Chapter 5. The Town's Curse. After Henry's return, strange things began to happen in Black Pines. The crops that had once flourished now withered in the fields, their leaves turning black as if burned by an unseen fire. Livestock disappeared overnight, leaving behind only strange, clawed footprints in the mud. And at night, the townsfolk reported hearing whispers in the wind, voices that called their names from the depths of the forest. Henry knew it was his fault. The leaf he had taken from the tree had upset some ancient balance, and now the forest was demanding payment. He tried to warn the others, but they were too frightened to listen. Some even blamed him for the curse, saying he had brought the forest's wrath upon them. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, a young man named Thomas approached Henry. Thomas was in his early 20s, with a restless spirit and a hunger for adventure. He had always been fascinated by the stories of the trail, and now, with the town in chaos, he saw his chance to prove himself. "I'm going to find that tree," Thomas said, his eyes burning with determination. "I'll make things right." Henry shook his head. "You don't understand what you're dealing with. That tree, it doesn't give, it takes, and it won't stop until it's taken everything." But Thomas wouldn't listen. He packed a bag with supplies and set off into the forest, following the same trail Henry had taken years before. Chapter 6. The Seeker's Journey. Thomas's journey was fraught with danger from the start. The forest seemed alive, its branches twisting to block his path, its shadows shifting to confuse him. He heard voices calling his name, but when he turned, there was no one there. The air grew colder with every step, and the silence became oppressive. After hours of walking, Thomas reached the clearing. The massive tree stood in the center, its symbols glowing faintly in the dim light. He approached it cautiously, his heart pounding in his chest. "What do you desire?" the voice asked, just as it had with Henry. Thomas hesitated. He had come here to save the town, but now he felt a deep, primal fear. "Still," he answered, "I want to undo what Henry did. I want to lift the curse." The voice was silent for a moment, as if considering his request. Then it spoke again. "Take a leaf from this tree, but remember, all things come at a cost." Thomas reached out and plucked a leaf. It was cold, like ice, and seemed to pulse faintly in his hand. But as he turned to leave, he felt a sharp pain in his chest. He stumbled, clutching at his heart, and fell to the ground. Chapter 7. The Final Confrontation. Back in Black Pines, Henry felt a sudden, overwhelming sense of dread. He knew something had gone wrong. Grabbing his coat, he ran into the forest, following the trail he had sworn never to take again. When he reached the clearing, he found Thomas lying on the ground, his face pale and his breathing shallow. The leaf he had taken was clutched in his hand, its glow fading. "Thomas!" Henry shouted, rushing to his side. "What have you done?" Thomas looked up at him, his eyes filled with pain. "I tried to fix it, but the tree, it took my life." Henry's heart sank. He knew what he had to do. He stood and approached the tree, his hands trembling. "I'm here," he said, his voice steady despite his fear. "Take me instead. Let the boy live, and let the town be free." The voice spoke again, softer this time. "You understand the price?" "I do," Henry replied. There was a moment of silence, and then the symbols on the tree began to glow brighter. Henry felt a sharp pain in his chest, just as Thomas had, but he didn't fight it. He closed his eyes and let the forest take him. Epilogue. The forest's silence. When Thomas woke, he was back in Black Pines. The curse had been lifted, the crops were growing again, the livestock had returned, and the whispers in the wind were gone. But Henry was nowhere to be found. The townsfolk never spoke of what had happened, but they knew the truth. The forest had taken Henry, just as it had taken others before him. And though the trail still existed, hidden deep within the trees, no one dared to seek it out. But sometimes, on quiet nights, when the wind rustled through the pines, the people of Black Pines would hear a faint voice, calling from the depths of the forest. It was a reminder that the trail was still there, waiting for the next foolhardy soul to take its first step. and the forest, as always, was listening. The Light That Never Dies. Chapter 1. The Island of Shadows. The island was a speck of land in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by endless waves and shrouded in perpetual fog. Jacob had read about it in an old newspaper article, a place where the lighthouse still shone every night, even though its keeper had vanished 2 decades ago. The locals called it the Light That Never Dies, and Jacob, ever the skeptic, had come to uncover the truth. The boat ride to the island was rough, the waves crashing against the hull as if trying to push him back. The fisherman who brought him, an old man with a face weathered by years at sea, had warned him not to go. "That lighthouse," the old man had said, his voice low and gravelly. "It's not right. The light, it's not for ships. It's for something else." Jacob had laughed it off at the time, but now, as he stepped onto the rocky shore, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching him. The air was thick with the smell of salt and decay, and the fog clung to him like a second skin. In the distance, the lighthouse loomed, its white paint peeling like dead flesh. The island itself was barren, with only a few gnarled trees clinging to life. The ground was rocky and uneven, making every step a challenge. As Jacob made his way toward the village, he noticed strange symbols carved into the rock circles within circles, with jagged lines radiating outward. They looked ancient, as if they had been there long before the lighthouse was built. Chapter 2. The Village of Whispers. The village was a cluster of weathered houses, their roofs sagging under the weight of years. The locals were few, their faces etched with lines of hardship and suspicion. As Jacob walked through the narrow streets, he felt their eyes on him, their whispers following him like shadows. "He's here for the lighthouse," someone muttered. "Fool, doesn't he know what happened to the last one?" Jacob approached a small tavern, its sign creaking in the wind. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of stale beer and smoke. The patrons fell silent as he entered, their eyes darting away as if he carried some unseen curse. "I'm looking for information about the lighthouse," Jacob said, addressing the room. "You're wasting your time," a voice replied. It belonged to a woman sitting in the corner, her face hidden in the shadows. "No one goes up there anymore, not since Samuel disappeared." Jacob sat down across from her, his curiosity piqued. "What happened to Samuel?" he asked. "He was the keeper," the woman said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But he wasn't just a man. He was chosen. The light, it's alive, and it needs a keeper to survive." Jacob leaned in closer. "Chosen? By whom?" "By the light," the woman replied. "It calls to those who are lost, those who have nothing left to lose. Samuel was one of them, and now it's calling to you." Chapter 3. The Keeper's Diary. Thomas, the old man from the village, led Jacob to the lighthouse. The path was overgrown, the trees leaning in as if trying to block their way. The lighthouse itself was a towering monolith, its walls cracked and stained with age. The door creaked open, revealing a dusty interior filled with old furniture and cobwebs. On a table near the stairs, Jacob spotted a leather-bound journal. He opened it, the pages crackling under his fingers. The handwriting was shaky, as if written in haste. The 12th of October. The light. It's not just a light, it's a barrier. I can feel it. Something is trying to get through. Something old. Something hungry. The 15th of October. The whispers are louder now. They're coming from the lens. They say they'll give me anything I want, but I know the price. The 20th of October. I can't leave. The light needs me. I am the keeper now, and the keeper must stay forever. Jacob's hands trembled as he closed the diary. He looked up at Thomas, who was staring at him with a knowing expression. "Told you," Thomas said. "Some things are better left alone." Chapter 4. The Light That Calls. That night, Jacob decided to stay in the lighthouse. He told himself it was for the story, but deep down, he couldn't deny the pull he felt toward the light. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the beam from the lighthouse flickered to life, casting its glow across the dark waters. But something was wrong. The light wasn't steady. It pulsed like a heartbeat, and its color shifted from white to an eerie green. Jacob climbed the spiral staircase, his footsteps echoing in the empty tower. When he reached the top, he froze. The lens was spinning, but there was no one there to operate it. And then he heard Ita whisper, so faint he almost thought he imagined it. Jacob. He spun around, but the room was empty. The whisper came again, louder this time. Jacob, come closer. The voice was coming from the lens. Jacob stepped forward, his heart pounding. As he approached, the light intensified, bathing him in its green glow. And then he saw Ita's shadow moving within the light. It was humanoid, but its shape shifted and twisted, as if it were made of smoke. I've been waiting for you, the shadow said, its voice echoing in Jacob's mind. You can have anything you want. Wealth, fame, power. All you have to do is let me in. Jacob stumbled back, his breath coming in short gasps. He turned and ran down the stairs, the whispers following him all the way to the bottom. Chapter 5. The Keeper's Warning. The next morning, Jacob found himself back in the village. He hadn't slept, the whispers still echoing in his mind. He needed answers, and there was only one person who might have them: Thomas. He found the old man sitting on his porch, just as before. Thomas listened quietly as Jacob recounted what had happened. You've seen it then, Thomas said, his voice grave. The thing in the light. Samuel called it the Watcher. It's been trapped there for centuries, feeding on the souls of those who get too close. Samuel was the last keeper. He gave his life to keep it contained. But why? Jacob asked. Why would he do that? Because if the Watcher escapes, it won't stop at this island. It'll spread, consuming everything in its path. The light is the only thing holding it back. Jacob felt a chill run down his spine. He had come here for a story, but now he was part of something much bigger. Chapter 6. The Final Stand. That night, Jacob returned to the lighthouse. The light was pulsing again, its green glow casting long shadows on the walls. He climbed the stairs, his resolve hardening with each step. When he reached the top, the shadow was waiting for him. You've come back, it said, its voice dripping with malice. I knew you would. I'm not here to make a deal, Jacob replied. I'm here to stop you. The shadow laughed, a sound that sent shivers down Jacob's spine. It lunged at him, but Jacob dodged, grabbing the diary from his bag. He flipped to the last page, where Samuel had written a single sentence. The light must never go out. Jacob ran to the control panel and began flipping switches. The light flickered, then grew brighter, its beam cutting through the shadow like a knife. The creature screamed, its form dissolving into smoke. But as the light reached its peak, Jacob felt a searing pain in his chest. He looked down to see his hands beginning to fade, just like the shadow. The light needs a keeper, the shadow whispered, its voice fading. And now, it has you. Epilogue. The Light That Never Dies. The villagers say the light still shines every night, its beam cutting through the darkness. Sometimes, if you listen closely, you can hear whispers coming from the tower. And if you're brave enough to climb the stairs, you might see him, the new keeper, his face pale and his eyes filled with regret. But the light never goes out, and the Watcher remains trapped. The Hollow Choir, a Dark Forest Tale. Chapter 1. The Vanishing Path. The town of Black Hollow clung to the edge of the forest like a scab. Elias noted how the villagers wore tiny brass bells around their necks to keep our voices where they belong. The innkeeper had muttered before slamming the door in his face. The road ended abruptly at the tree line, as if someone had taken an axe to civilization itself. Elias adjusted his pack, fingers brushing against his mother's journal in the pocket. 20 years since she'd walked into Blackroot Forest, chasing some folk melody only she could hear. They'd found her shoes at the edge, polished and arranged neatly, as if she'd simply stepped out of them. The first step onto the forest path sent a jolt through his bones. The air tasted metallic, like licking an old coin. Behind him, the entrance rippled. He spun around. The path was gone. replaced by an unbroken wall of oaks. Their trunks pulsed faintly, matching the rhythm of his panicked breath. "You shouldn't be here, boy." Elias nearly drew his knife. The voice belonged to an old woman leaning against a birch, her face a web of scars. One eye was milky white, the other black as a crow's. "Lucretia," she said, tapping a gnarled finger against her collarbone. The bell there was cracked, silent. "You're the spitting image of your mother. Same stubborn chin." Elias's throat tightened. "You knew her?" Lucretia smiled, revealing teeth filed to points. "Oh, we all know each other here. The question is, does the forest know you?" A rustle in the canopy. Above them, hundreds of silver-eyed crows tilted their heads in unison. Chapter 2. The Faces in the Bark. The deeper they went, the more the trees twisted. Not just in shape, their bark split open in gasping mouths, whispering fragments of Elias's past. "You left the window open the night she disappeared. Found her hair in your porridge 3 days after." Lucretia grabbed his wrist. "Don't listen. It's just picking through your memories like a magpie with shiny things." Elias yanked free, pressing his palm against a weeping fissure. The sap burned, searing his fingerprints away. When he pulled back, the tree's lips formed his mother's voice. "Elias, why won't you sing for me?" The crows erupted from the branches in a feathered hurricane. One landed on his shoulder, dropping something into his Lapis' own pocket knife, the one he'd left on his nightstand. The blade was black with dried blood. Lucretia went rigid. "It's making its move. The offering stone isn't far now." Elias barely heard her. The crow was whispering in his ear, its breath reeking of rotting choir robes. "She's waiting at the altar. All you have to do is harmonize." Chapter 3. The Offering Stone. The clearing stank of wet earth and burnt sugar. At its center stood a slab of basalt, stained with centuries of sacrifices. On it lay a doll crudely stitched from leaves and what looked like human skin. Its button eyes were Elias's mother's. Lucretia made the sign of the horned god. "Don't touch it. That's how it gets." Elias was already reaching. The moment his fingers brushed the doll, his vision shattered into fragments. A Puritan girl screaming as roots burst from her mouth. His mother kneeling at the stone, her lips sewn shut with vine. Lucretia, young and weeping, carving a name into the doll's chest. The visions cut off as Lucretia drove her boot into the altar. The forest shrieked. Vines lashed around her legs, moss surging up to gag her. Elias tried to pull her free only for her skin to split like bark, revealing hollow darkness beneath. Her remaining eye rolled toward him, terrified. "Run, you fool! It's not a forest, it's a—" The vines yanked her underground. Where she'd stood, a single crow feather drifted down, impaled on a bone-white mushroom. The doll sat up. "Daddy," it giggled in Elias's voice, "why did you let her go?" Chapter 4. The Choir. The trees began to sing. Not in metaphor, their trunks distended, splitting into grotesque mouths that vomited sound. The melody was his mother's lullaby, warped beyond recognition. "Hush now, don't you cree. The hollow eats your lullabies." Elias clapped his hands over his ears. Blood trickled between his fingers. The doll danced on the altar, its stitches popping to reveal a tiny obsidian mirror inside. He grabbed it and saw them. Thousands of faces pressed against an infinite darkness, mouths open in silent screams. His mother floated among them, her lips moving. "It's not so bad once you stop fighting." The largest face stirred at the back. Not a tree, not even a god. Something older, its edges fraying into root and rock and raven feathers. "You wandered into my throat," little note. It boomed through the mirror. "Shall I swallow or spit you out?" Elias's ribs ached. Looking down, he saw his sternum had become translucent, a hollow cavity where his heart should be, echoing with the choir's dirge. Chapter 5. The Last Verse. The knife was in his hand. The doll's laughter rang in his skull. "Cut the threads! Free us!" begged the faces in the mirror. "Join us!" crooned his mother's shadow. "Fight!" roared the thing, wearing Lucretia's skin as it erupted from the earth, half woman, half splintered oak. Elias plunged the blade into the doll. The forest convulsed. The choir's song became a cacophony of shrieks as the trees vomited up their victims' skeletal figures with bark-growing skin, still singing through rotted throats. His mother's corpse tumbled onto the altar, her mouth blooming with black orchids. The obsidian mirror cracked. The great eye beyond blinked. "Clever note," it rumbled. "But who will conduct the silence now?" Elias looked at his hands. The veins had turned green. Bark crept up his wrists as the first true note of the hollow choir tore from his lips. Epilogue: The New Folklorist. Mira adjusted her recorder, frowning at the static. The locals claimed no one had entered Blackroot Forest in decades. Yet here she stood, at a freshly cleared path, her boots crushing bone-white mushrooms. The journal in her backpack weighed more than it should. She'd found it at a flea market, its pages blank except for one phrase: "Listen for the lullaby." A crow landed on the altar stone, dropping something at her feet, a doll with button eyes that matched hers exactly. From deep in the forest, a new voice joined the choir, and the trees smiled. The Return. Chapter 1. The Disappearance. It was the summer of 1989 when Daniel Morgan vanished. A quiet, reserved 22-year-old, Daniel had gone on a solo hiking trip into the dense Appalachian wilderness near Black Ridge, Pennsylvania. He left on a Friday morning, telling his family he would be back by Sunday evening, but Sunday came and went. By Monday morning, his worried parents reported him missing. The search lasted for weeks. Local authorities, rescue teams, and volunteers combed the mountains, but Daniel was nowhere to be found. No footprints, no campsite, no belongings, just gone. Eventually, the case went cold, and the town moved on, though whispers of what might have happened haunted Black Ridge for decades. Then, on a rainy evening in 2019, exactly 30 years after his disappearance, Daniel came home. Chapter 2. The Return. It was around 9 p.m. when a knock echoed through the quiet suburban home of Claire Morgan, Daniel's older sister. She had long since given up hope, mourning him as dead. So when she opened the door and saw him standing there young, unchanged, exactly as he had been in 1989, her heart nearly stopped. Daniel stood in the dim porch light, his jeans and jacket still the same ones he had worn on the day he left. Not aged, not a day older. His hair was the same length. His skin was unwrinkled. He looked, frozen in time. "Claire?" His voice was soft, confused. Claire staggered back, gripping the doorframe. This isn't possible. "I don't understand," Daniel murmured. "What day is it?" She told him. He stared at her, then at his own hands. "That's impossible," he whispered. "I was just in the woods yesterday." But it wasn't yesterday. It had been 30 years. Chapter 3. The Investigation. The town exploded with curiosity. Daniel became the subject of national news. Scientists and doctors examined him, yet his DNA, fingerprints, and even dental records matched perfectly. There was no logical explanation. Authorities interrogated him. Where had he been? What had happened? But Daniel had no answers. He remembered hiking, finding an old wooden cabin deep in the forest, and knocking on the door. A man answered. He had sharp, piercing eyes but a warm smile. He invited Daniel inside to rest. "I fell asleep," Daniel said, "and when I woke up, I was outside, near the road leading back to town." But that made no sense. 3 decades had passed. Chapter 4. Something is wrong. As days went by, something felt off. Daniel never seemed to sleep. He had no appetite. The family tried to make him eat, but he would only stare at the food, pushing it around his plate. His presence unsettled people. It wasn't just the fact that he hadn't aged, it was the way he moved, the way his eyes lingered too long, how he seemed to be listening to things no one else could hear. And then, the disappearances started. First, it was a local boy. then an elderly woman, then a couple from out of town. They simply vanished just like Daniel had. That's when Claire started watching her brother more closely. One night, unable to sleep, she stepped out of her room and saw Daniel standing at the window, staring out at the dark woods. She called his name. He didn't turn. Instead, he whispered, "He's calling them." Chapter 5. The Cabin. Claire became obsessed. She dug through old maps, researching missing person reports, and eventually found something strange in old legend, passed down for generations, about a cabin that appeared only to those who were lost. Locals called it the waiting place, a place between worlds. Those who entered were said to never return, or return changed. Determined to find the truth, Claire packed supplies and drove to the trail where Daniel had last been seen in 1989. He watched her, silent, but didn't try to stop her. She hiked for hours until, deep in the woods, she saw it. The cabin, old, weathered, hidden by time. Her heart pounded as she stepped onto the creaking porch. The door was slightly open. She pushed it wider and froze. Inside, there were dozens of people. Some were sitting in old wooden chairs. Some were standing. Their faces were blank, their eyes hollow. And among them, she saw her brother, another Daniel. A different Daniel. He looked at her, terrified. "Claire?" he gasped. Then the door slammed shut. Chapter 6. The Truth. The Daniel who had returned to Blackridge was not her brother. It was something else. The real Daniel had been trapped in the cabin for 30 years, caught in an endless loop of time. Every few decades, the cabin let one person go boot, only if they lured someone else inside to take their place. The thing, pretending to be Daniel, had led Claire there. She turned, desperate to escape, but the door was gone. The walls stretched. The floor shifted beneath her feet. The room darkened, shadows creeping toward her. A whisper curled around her ear. "Your turn." Chapter 7. The Final Disappearance. The next morning, Daniel, the other Daniel, packed a bag and left town, just as Claire Morgan was declared missing. A week later, he was spotted in another city. A different name, a different life. He blended in, just as he had done before. Somewhere, deep in the Appalachian wilderness, a new cabin door creaked open, and inside, Claire Morgan sat in the darkness, staring at the door, waiting for the next traveler to arrive. And so, the story falls silent, but only for now, because beyond this screen, another mystery is already unfolding. Another whisper is rising in the darkness. When it calls your name, will you dare to listen? Don't miss the next chilling tale. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. The shadows are waiting, and they always come back for those who wander alone,